This video will show you the process I took to make a memory quilt out of t-shirts. The first thing you'll want to do is cut each t-shirt so you can preserve the design. Make sure that all the t-shirts are the same size. If you're having sashing, you'll need to cut the strips, and you'll also need to cut a piece for each back of each t-shirt. Once everything is cut out, you'll start sewing the pieces together. I'm using the quilt as you go method. This will be a king size t-shirt quilt. You'll need to make sure you have all the supplies that you need, including batting. Once the pieces are sewn together, you'll cut out the batting. Make sure that you leave an inch around all of the squares so that once you start quilting, if there's any shrinkage, you'll have plenty of room. If you're going to be making a quilt pattern, you'll need a chalk. Here are those corner pieces with the quilted corners. This shows you what the quilting looks from the back side of the pieces. I quilted around each pattern to hold the front of the t-shirts to the backing of the quilt. I'm starting to combine the quilt here using the sashing with the top stitching and sewing them into rows. Once all the rows are sewn, it'll be time to connect one row to the next. Here's what the sashing looks like as it's pinned on. I'm sewing on the sashing to a couple of blocks of the quilt. And what I have here is a 2-inch piece that I've folded in half and ironed. And I'm doing a 1/4-inch seam, and on the back I have a piece that is 1.5 inches. So 1/4 inch and a 1/4 inch will be taken up and end up with 1 inch on the back. And actually this is a 2.5 inch, so I'm doing a 1/4 inch seam on each side of this basically, so that'll leave 1 inch left because it's folded in half. So I've got it pinned, and you'll see that it kind of bunches a little. So as I sew, I lift up the pin to give it a little room to stitch down to keep it all straight. Let's see if I can do this a little bit for you. Like that. After you've sewn the 2-inch piece on one side and the 1-inch piece on the other, you're then going to connect the other side of the 1-inch piece, actually it's 1.5, I know, with a 1/4 inch seam to the next section of the quilt, the next block, and then you're going to put a small piece of batting in the ditch there so that when you fold this over, you don't have a divot. So I'm going to fold this over and pin it, and then we're going to stitch right close to each of these edges. One of the most useful tools when quilting is a walking foot. If you don't have one yet, they are a good investment. Walking foot is installed. I've got a piece of material, batting, piece of material to test it. Looks great. New tool, yay! Once I had the rows sewn together, it was time to combine one row to the next, so I moved my workspace out to the living room on a large work table so I would have room to work with the bulky fabric. Having the extra space sure made putting this quilt together a lot easier. Also, using the quilt as you go technique left less bulk under the arm of my sewing machine and made me super happy. When the quilt was completely sewn together, it was time to trim the outer edge and apply the binding. I created the binding by making bias tape, by sewing at a diagonal to help blend the pieces together. Here is a view of the back of the quilt after the binding was attached, and then here is a view of the front of the quilt. The quilt came together beautifully. Here's the final result. And here it is ready to be shipped to Iowa. So I decided to use what I had left over for scraps and make a couple accent pillows. So now this is the only fabric I have left from the king size sheets. This pillow is strips of this sewn together on both sides. And you can see the nap, which gives it a nice fun look. Gives it a little variation there. This one was made out of 2 squares that I had left, and then I quilted to match the quilt. On the front, the back side is plain. And I used piping on the edges on both quilts. Sorry, on both pillows. So there you go. The quilt is now in its new home, and I hope it provides years of enjoyment. For all the step-by-step instructions, head on over to my perpetual project.